My apologies. We are now live here on the Dribble Drive podcast. I am your host, Austin Resner, episode 27. We're talking some MTEs. We're talking championships. We're talking Big Ten season starting up this weekend, a little appetizer of some Big Ten basketball, all sorts of stuff to get to. We got a ton of people joining us on the show today. But first, I want to let you know we are on Apple and Spotify podcast. Download, subscribe, give us a rating, tell a friend. All that stuff helps us know how we are doing. We're also on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, which may be where you're watching us live right now. Every Tuesday at noon, we're going to be broadcasting live here on the Back Home Network YouTube channel. There is a chance, I was looking ahead of the schedule, Christmas Eve is a Tuesday. I, as well as many of you, will probably be spending that day with family. Probably going to release that episode on the 23rd. That weekend before, the 21st, 22nd, is a ton of great games. So we definitely will have a show. It will likely be on the 23rd. That's a Monday instead of the Tuesday on Christmas Eve. That way you all can spend the holidays with your friends. And maybe this is a good listen for you as you travel for the holidays. So we'll get that out there early on that 23rd instead of the 24th. But as we continue on today, a couple of news and notes we want to hit on here. Let's start with the AP poll that is out here for the Week 5 AP poll. And let me see if I can pull that up here. We've got a graphic. There we go. So the AP poll, UCLA maintains its position at number 1. USC still at number 6. Nice jump for Maryland, I think more so because of some of the people that ahead of them that lost. They jump up to number 7. Ohio State at number 12. Iowa continues to move up. They're at number 17. We'll talk to Raina Harmon coming up here on the show, assistant coach for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Number 21, Illinois. They did suffer their first defeat this week to Kentucky, dropped back 2 spots in the rankings. How about the newcomers into the top 25 from the Glove State up there in Michigan? The Wolverines, number 23. Spartans, number 24. We're going to talk to the voice of both of those schools, Matt Park from Michigan, Dalton Shetler of Michigan State, coming up later in the show. Nebraska hangs tight at number 25. Oregon drops out. They are receiving votes. Same with Minnesota, who's moved into that receiving votes category. As you see, some of the scores start to flash from our week that was in the Big Ten Conference. This has been a terrific week of basketball with the MTEs going on. Mentioned we've got a very busy show here with lots of guests joining us. One of the things that we will do, and we'll go ahead and start with this one, is our conversation with, and we're joined now, and apologies, I'm playing it too soon here. Raina Harmon, the assistant coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, joined us earlier this week, and actually it was last night, and we had a chance to chat with her about the great start to the season for the Iowa Hawkeyes, who went down to Cancun in their MTE event, got a couple of wins. The Hawkeyes beat Rhode Island 69-62 and BYU 68-48. One of the notes from this is that Lucy Olson is out right now for Iowa, missed both games, kind of a freak injury, tripped on something and gashed her knee before one of the practices in Cancun. So her status is game to game. It's not anything long-term, they don't believe. But she did not play in this tournament. They won without her, though. Addison O'Grady was great in Game 1. Hannah Stolke really good in Game 2. Great to see Aaliyah Guyton play well in that second game. The freshman scored 11 points, 3 of 3 from the three-point line. Turnovers a bit of an issue without Lucy Olson, their point guard out there, but I'm sure they'll shore those up. And they've got a big game coming up on Saturday in the women's edition of the Champions Classic as they take on Tennessee Lady Vols in Brooklyn, New York. We'll talk about all of this stuff here with Raina Harmon. But what I should mention, Lucy Olson, the injury. There's a couple injuries going around the Big Ten, significant right now. Indiana's Sydney Parrish remains out with a leg injury she suffered in the Bahamas. Terry Morin says she's going to be out kind of week to week here for the Hoosiers. Mara Braun is going to have foot surgery for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and it's undetermined whether or not she will play this season, but I did see that news come across, which is a bummer because when Mara Braun is playing her best, that Minnesota team is really fun to watch. But give Minnesota credit. even without Mara Braun, they have continued to play well. They went down to the Big Easy Classic and easily took care of Houston and Louisiana. They're getting great production out of Grace Grahalski, Mallory Heyer, Sophie Hart. They're getting production from all over the court. And so they almost learned last season how to play without Mara Braun, and now they're kind of figuring that out. So good for Minnesota. A bummer for all those players who are dealing with those injuries. Hopefully we get them back sooner rather than later. Well, let's play that interview that I had earlier this week with Raina Harmon, assistant coach for the Iowa Hawkeyes, who come out of the Cancun Challenge with a pair of wins. And we're joined now by assistant coach for Iowa women's basketball, Raina Harmon. Raina, thanks so much for joining us here on the show. It's been a wonderful start for your Iowa Hawkeyes so far this season, undefeated. Just got back from Cancun. Talk a little bit about that trip and how you felt like the Hawkeyes played in a couple of wins.
Yeah, well, I mean, shoot, we landed the other day and it was 19 degrees outside. And so I definitely wanted to head back to Cancun. But I think, our team this year, we've gotten off to a fantastic start. We've had some players that have a lot of experience in the last two Final Fours, and then we added a lot of new pieces this year, 6 newcomers. But I thought we had a tremendous summer. And, one thing that we say about all these newcomers is that the culture of this program is really strong. And even under a new head coach, Jan Jensen, right, who's been here for 24 years, the culture is still strong. And so although the names on the back of the jerseys may change, the culture is a culture. And so from the first day, I mean, they were getting after it, right? The first day of our practice this year sounded like the last day of last year's practice. And so really, what I found interesting, though, is Iowa has always been known for being an offensive juggernaut. And it seems like, after 8 games, this team is really finding their identity on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, it has been impressive because I think the whole storyline around Iowa was, okay, you lost 4 starters. Can you fill those spots? And it's almost been seamless. I turned them on, I think the first game of the year. I'm like, oh, this just looks like Iowa women's basketball. It's the same thing, just new players. And let's talk a little bit about those players. I know she's hurt right now, but Lucy Olson coming into this program, high-level scorer. Obviously, nobody is Caitlin Clark. But how have you worked her into the offensive system, and how did she pick it up so quickly?
Yeah, we were very fortunate to get Lucy out of the transfer portal, and especially being, like I said, we do a lot of recruiting based on who's going to fit our offensive system. And so the fact that she was the 3rd leading scorer in the nation was really good. And we know that, she wasn't going to come in and try to fill Caitlin Clark's shoes. We didn't need that from her. But to bring, her style of play that she had at Villanova and see how we can integrate that into our offense. And so, while you think about last year, people had to defend us probably from a little bit before the logo. Right now, she's able to get downhill and get 2 feet in the paint. She can hit shooters on all sides. Our posts are coming on really strong right now. And then she has a mid-range that's out of this world. And so, our offense really, a lot of people with a lot of different skill sets, we can work them into our offense. And I thought she's come in and been really seamless for us.
You work a lot with the perimeter players at Iowa, and obviously with Lucy out in Cancun, a lot of big spots for some of these new starters, Taylor McCabe, Kylie Feuerbach, Sydney Falter. They've all played great so far this season. Talk a little bit about their games and kind of the challenge you gave them during the offseason to take that step forward.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you guys have been watching and waiting and waiting while you're watching for, the last 2-3, years. And so Right now, this is you guys' team, and time to step up and time to take on more of a leadership role, right? Not just in the communicative aspect, but also, in your play and making sure that you guys lead from the front. And so I thought they took those conversations really to heart at the beginning of the summer when we started having those conversations. And like I said, I mean, these are the ones that you just named specifically are the student athletes that's actually had the experience every day going against a Kate Martin, a Caitlin Clark, and a Gabby Marshall. And so they're experienced. They've been in some big moments, and I don't think our biggest moment has come this season by any means. But they're ready for that moment when it does. And I think they're doing a great job of leading those newcomers that are with us right now, too.
Yeah, Sydney Falter, one of those. I thought she was so good last year in the NCAA tournament, filling in for Molly Davis when she went down late in the season. How much is she building off of that experience? Because like you said, those are big, throw you right in the cauldron moments there playing in the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and so unfortunately for Sydney, I mean, she started off this summer, but had to have a little bit, a scope there with her knee right at the beginning of the fall. And so it was kind of a bummer for her because she wanted to be there for her first practice, or should I? Yeah, her last first practice. And but unfortunately, she had to do so from the sidelines and lead from the sidelines. But I think perspective is always good when you're looking at a player like her and her being able to just lead those in her position group, right? So thinking of like a Taylor Strimlow who's coming in, or a Tegan Mulaney, who are going to get minutes this year, and her being able to lead them and talk them through some things without even getting on a floor was huge for her, just in terms of her growth and her perspective for this entire season. And so you look at somebody like Sydney Falter, she might have been fourth or fifth on the depth chart last year, and that's kind of moved up a little bit, and I've challenged her to just expand her game a little bit more, finishing at the rim a little bit more consistently and upping her 3-point field goal percentage. And she's still getting back into the groove of things, but I have no doubt that she will.
One of your young freshmen that we know is uber talented, dealing with an injury in high school, Aaliyah Guyton, gets out there a couple games ago. I know Jan Jansen said, we weren't sure we were going to get her out there. It worked late in the game. She kind of got some of the jitters off, and then scores 11 points in Cancun, goes 3 for 3 from the 3-point line. Talk a little bit about Aaliyah Guyton and how I know it's not easy to come back from an injury like that, and how important it was to get her some of those minutes early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, 3 games ago, what was that, Washington State? So just last weekend, had an opportunity to work her in for maybe 2 minutes, but for an opportunity for her to get in front of 14,000 people. Right. I mean, that was a big moment for her, to be able to score her first points. Kind of just got, everything behind her and ready to move forward and say, okay, I'm healthy. I hit the deck a few times. I'm ready to go. I got my first points out the way. And then a fortunate loss to Lucy Olsen down in Cancun. I think she was just ready to step up. Aaliyah has been working this entire time, especially, kids battling knee injuries. Really, the only thing they can work on is their form. And so, I mean, for the last 6 months, she's been expanding her range and getting behind that 3-point arc. It was great to see it pay off for her down in Cancun.
So you've been on this staff with Jan Jansen, the assistant coach. Now you're on the staff with Jan Jansen, the head coach. How have you seen her kind of transform into the head coach of Iowa women's basketball?
Yeah, one thing is, I mean, Jan is who she is, right? And so it's a bit of breath of fresh air that she didn't move over one seat and then all of a sudden turn into, demanding or wanting all these things. She holds us accountable, but she is who she is. But it's been great just seeing Jan be able to come up with her own philosophies, because, again, she's been with Lisa Buter for so long. But for her to be able to say, okay, I want to work on defense a little bit more in this way, or I want to tweak this offense this way, because, her being a post coach, maybe she wanted a few more sets ran for the post. I would say, to be honest, the way that we're trekking, the job that Lisa Buter left is not necessarily the job that Jan picked up, right? I mean, you think about the transfer portal and how fast that's moving, NIL, revenue sharing, all those things. And so Jan's been really thrown into kind of a new position, but it's been fun just to see her process as she is kind of like working through a few of those kinks.
What would you say at this stage? I know it's only early in December, but at this stage, what are the strengths and the weaknesses you're working on with this Iowa team right now?
Yeah, right. Right off the top, I mentioned this before, but I would say one of our strengths right now is our tenacity on the defensive end. And last year we challenged our team to not give up so many offensive rebounds. And I think that this year's team has really taken that to heart, and just making sure that we're keeping other teams to one possession and then going down, running our transition. Which brings me to my next point. I think our transition offense has stayed, right? Yep. And our transition offense looks different, but it's still really, really good. Even our offense, it's not necessarily what it looked like, but you can see any night. I mean, we have 5 players that are probably going to be a leading scorer. You're not going to just say, I'm pretty sure this one kid is going to be the leading scorer and the rest are going to get theirs here or there. I mean, it might be Lucy. It might be Addie. It might be Hannah Stuelke. So to be able to have, some players come in and you can't really pinpoint, where those points are going to come from, I would say is another pro that we have working for us. I would say, some things that we're just trying to shore up, especially after the last 2 games that we had down in Cancun, and especially as we move to the game next weekend, is shoring up a little bit of those turnovers. I think, without having Lucy on the floor, we got a little bit turnover prone, and to be able to have that many turnovers and still be able to come out victorious says a lot about the defense that we're providing on the other end of the floor. So I think, just finding a little bit more, getting a little bit more in sync and cutting down on those turnovers will really be beneficial for us.
You've been the perimeter coach here at Iowa, so that means you worked a little bit with Caitlin Clark over her time in Iowa City. What are some of your favorite highlights and stories that you have from working with her?
Yeah, I'd say obviously, my favorite is watching her break that record at home in front of that crowd at Michigan. And I just saw a video of it, I think either this morning or yesterday, just kind of reliving that, right? And getting, I don't know if it was offensive rebound or a steal because it got cut off, but her just dribbling up the left side of the floor, and it's almost like the crowd went silent. I mean, we're talking about 15,000 people, and she's taking 4 dribbles up to that logo. And I mean, she lets it go. You can hear a pin drop, and then all of a sudden, 14,000 people is just like, oh my gosh. The wild part about that, I'm trying to win a game. She hits that, and I'm like, get back on defense. And then I look up and I go, oh, all right, my bad. Have your moment. So that was just a really fun moment, and a testament of, who she is out there having fun with the crowd. And, basketball is just a game that she loves immensely. And so to be able to coach a kid that's that passionate, that has that much fun on the floor, it was really a treat for me.
I've always said going to Carver Hawkeye is so much fun because it's such a good crowd. It is an intelligent crowd. They know when the team needs them to pick them up. They cheer at the right times. I just love broadcasting games from Carver Hawkeye. It is a great spot.
Absolutely. I always tweet Hawk fans, best fans, because, I mean, they show up for us. It doesn't even matter. I remember we played Indiana at home, maybe 2 years ago in the middle of a polar vortex.
Yes.
And I mean,
yep.
And the fans still came out, and so rain, sleet, shine, sun, it doesn't matter. Hawk fans are going to show up to support us, and we love that.
I remember we were driving in for that game, and it looked like the apocalypse out there on the highways, and all of a sudden we get in there, and it's full. I was like, man, these people really, I mean,
that's right.
It's crazy. You mentioned that big game. We'll end on this. You got a big one with Tennessee coming up this weekend. What's kind of the scouting report on the Lady Vols, and how do you go about trying to beat them this weekend?
Yeah, so it's funny how we've having these games and these big slated games, which were this time last year we were putting these games together. The head coaches were different, the teams were different, and you look at them now. I mean, same with Virginia Tech, right? So 2 new head coaches that are meeting with teams that have been really successful in the past. And so as we're starting to, get a grasp of who Tennessee is, we know that they like to press, and they like to press for 40 minutes, and they try to wreak havoc on their opponents. I think they're turning teams over like almost 30 times a game. So like I said, making sure that we can shore up some of those turnovers are going to be key for us. I would also say something that we've really honed in on this summer is they really like to get after it with their offensive rebounding. And so keeping them off the offensive glass is going to be key for us.
Raina, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Awesome to watch Iowa so far this season. You guys have just picked up right where you left off. Undefeated start to the year. Big one with Tennessee this weekend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Austin. Appreciate you.
Big thank you to Raina Harmon for joining us on the show. A great insight into the start of the season for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I've thought they've looked the same as they have in years past, even without all the players they have had in years past. They've filled those spots, and Iowa's rolling right now. That's a big one with Tennessee coming up this weekend. Let's start handing out some of our weekly awards. The team of the week, that's the Michigan State Spartans. How about Acrisure Classic champions with some wins at the Acrisure Classic? They went out there and beat California 78-72 and Vanderbilt 78-70. And they are 8-0 now and ranked number 24 in the country. And for more on this Michigan State team, we are joined by Dalton Shetler, the play-by-play voice of Michigan State women's basketball. And Dalton, it was a first off, congratulations, great win, great week for Michigan State. You win the Acrisure Classic. Let's start with that Cal game. Big come from behind win. Kind of talk about how Michigan State kind of dug themselves out of the big hole, got themselves going, and ultimately came back and won that game.
It's a great point, Austin. And so for folks that don't know, Michigan State was down 16 in this game with 2 minutes and 12 seconds to play in the third quarter. And you're kind of sitting there and obviously this isn't a spot you want to be in, right? You never really want to be down, period. You don't want to be down 16, but you kind of known that this Michigan State team, based under last year's example and data under Robin Fralick, that they're capable of coming back. And we know what Michigan State does with Robin Fralick. They full court press. They get a lot of possessions. They're a high-scoring team. They're a top 5 offense in the country when it comes to lighting up points on the scoreboard. They're top 5, top 10 in forcing turnovers. And basically, they got in there, had a couple of those possessions where they'd get a bucket, get a steal, get a bucket, and immediately that deficit just cut in half. And then you're working in a different game. And really what led to that, Austin, that a lot of people don't know about, especially if they didn't see it, Jaden Simmons and Nyla Hampton. Coming off the bench, those two transfers, Jaden Simmons came from Arizona State. Nyla Hampton came from Ball State. Previously, she was at Bowling Green under Robin Freilich there at Bowling Green. But those two came in, and you could almost feel a wave change in the game when they came in, and really forcing that defensive pressure. Jocelyn Tate was a big part of that as well. And then Michigan State finally just started to hit some shots. Like, they just were having a tough day for a long time. Officiating was a frustrating one in that specific game. But they were able to hit some timely shots. Julia Ayrault hits 1,000 career points in that game with a free throw to seal it late. But she also hit a pick and pop three to put the Spartans up 6 points under a minute to go. I mean, Julia Ayrault, we were kidding with her yesterday on the Robin Freilich show that she's Captain Clutch. She had some clutch buckets out there in Palm Springs, and now the Spartans 8-0. It's tied for the greatest start in women's basketball history for Michigan State. So big things happening in East Lansing.
That's awesome. This Michigan State team, they are the Dribble Drive team of the week. I thought that felt fitting after an Acrisure Classic win for Michigan State, as you mentioned, their best start in program history at 8-0. Julia Ayrault, you mentioned she scored her 1,000th point. Grace Van Sluten's been really good. I know we talked preseason. You were hopeful that the Van Sluten addition would really help Julia Ayrault kind of return back to her normal position. How have you seen those two kind of work together through the early portions?
I mean, it's been such a natural mesh of those two early on. Robin yesterday was talking about them when we chatted on her show about them, and she said, I call them double trouble. I mean, they've had 2 games now this year where they've both had double-doubles. They both had a double-double in the Vanderbilt game where Grace also hit 1,000 career points. So now both of them already in the 1,000 career point club, but those two playing high-low off of each other. And look, Grace had 25 points in that comeback win against Vanderbilt in the championship game, and she left some on the table. Like, she honestly didn't have her best shooting day and had 25. If she hit some of the layups that you'd normally see her make, she would have flirted with a 40-point game. And that's just point blank how it was. But those two, they're so versatile. And it creates so many issues because they're so mobile as forwards that a lot of post players have a hard time keeping up with them. It's almost like you kind of see them chasing the tail of Ayrault and Van Sluten, but they've been able to play together really, really well. Van Sluten has 25 in the championship game. Ayrault has 24 in the championship game. And again, just timely buckets. Whenever some offense needed to be made, they would find those two, and they delivered.
Yeah, I named the player of the week this week, Julia Ayrault, and it was all.
Agreed.
I mean, she was in there, and Grace Van Sluten was in the running. There's a bunch of others we'll go through throughout the show, but Julia Ayrault, 23 points a game this week, 10.5 rebounds, averaged a double-double in the Acrisure, scored her 1,000th career point. I know she means so much to this program. She meant so much last year for the big build-up for Robin Freilich in year 1, and she's just a really fun player to watch.
She's a fun player to watch. She's a special, neat kid. And this is somebody, she actually was on the Robin Freilich show yesterday. And I'll put out a clip later on my Twitter or X. You can follow me at Dalton Shetler, shameless plug. But I'll put out a clip from the show where Julia was talking about, look, 3 years ago, she missed the entire season. She had an injury. She didn't get to play at all. 2 years ago, she was averaging 2 or 3 points per game. I mean, nobody really gave her any credit. Nobody really was thinking of her much. It was just kind of a frustrating situation. And she said yesterday, point blank, I was kind of ready just to be done with basketball. Like, I was considering just quitting and hanging it up. Like, this just wasn't very fun anymore. I wasn't enjoying myself. And then Robin came in. They had a meeting, and they talked about some of those real honest conversations they had when Robin got here to East Lansing. And Robin said, I hear you. Why don't we just try this? Let's see if we can't rekindle something. Let's just give this a whirl, see what happens. And what happened last year was she became an all Big Ten first team member, averaging 15 points, 7.5 rebounds a game. Right now, she's 4th in school history for blocked shots at 146 blocks for her career. One more she ties to become top 3. And this is somebody who's just 6'2". Like, she's had a tremendous career now. She's the 31st Spartan to reach 1,000 career points. And look what she's doing this year. She's averaging about 16 points a game. Like it's still carrying the momentum from what she did a season ago. And for somebody who's as neat and special of a person besides a player, it's really one of the cool stories. Robin says this is one of the in all the hubbub of all the bad that exists in college athletics anymore. Julia Arald's one of those stories for why people should still be coaching, why people should be involved in college athletics and athletics period, is to invest into people like Julia Arald.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then one of those people who's been around, has kind of stayed the course, and as you said, fought through some early struggles, and now here she is. I think when you get a win like they did against Cal from 16 down, it's hard then to come out the next game sometimes, and you've expended a lot of energy in that Cal game, and then you fall behind in the Vanderbilt game as well, and Michigan State comes back again. Talk us through how Michigan State was able to be crowned the Acrisure Classic champions.
You know, it's actually an interesting point. And I think the Cal game, again, you don't really want to find yourself down 16, but I think it gave you some confidence when you're like, oh, it doesn't really matter what the score is. Like we're in the game no matter what. The Vanderbilt game was really interesting, Austin, because the feeling amongst a lot of the staff was early in that game, Michigan State was controlling the game, but because of just missed layups, there were so many missed layups. They found themselves down by about 10 at the end of the first quarter. They had so many good looks. They just could not hit some of the layups. So finally, those start to drop. They start to create some turnovers. They start cleaning it up on their end. They had some uncharacteristic, self-inflicted turnovers as well. It's a team that, again, is top 5 in the country in turnover margin and forcing turnovers. They don't cough it up a ton like that in comparison. They were having a hard time early on. They cleaned it up. And once that got cleaned up and once layups started to fall, like it became a bit, I don't want to say comebacks are easy, but in comparison to where the score was at, it became a lot easier of a game for Michigan State just when simple shots dropped.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like you hear somebody say it and you laugh at it because it's like, just make shots. Like it's about who makes more shots. And ultimately, that's what basketball comes down to. If you don't make shots, you're not going to win basketball games. You find a way to make them. Obviously, that's when the comebacks start to happen for Michigan State. First time that Michigan State has been ranked under Robin Freilich. I know it's December and the coaching staff probably doesn't care about the rankings, but it is probably an important moment, at least a moment of, okay, we are here. We are taking last season. We're building off of it. Now we're ranked. It's kind of like a trampoline opportunity here for Michigan State, now finding themselves in the top 25.
I think you're spot on. And Michigan State, yes, sits at now number 24. It's the first time in 4 years that Michigan State women's basketball has been in the AP top 25, which is kind of hard to believe if you really kind of think about it. But they get in there. The net rankings came out yesterday. And of course, the net takes a little bit longer, right, to get real accurate, but they popped in at number 6 in the net rankings, which is nothing to necessarily sneeze at either. But no, and you're right. I don't know how much the staff really takes investment into this, but the fans are excited. And that's something big here in East Lansing is you're starting to really see a lot of people take notice of what an inspiring, exciting team they have with their women's basketball group. And that's been really cool. And to your point, it's kind of a feather in the cap for the Robin Freilich era to say, hey, look, this is working. How do we capitalize on this momentum even further? And Austin, by the way, you and I talked on this podcast before the year started, and we tried giving our top 5 predictions of the Big Ten conference. I just wanted to say, with the latest AP top 25, like we told you at the time that we were splitting hairs. There are 9 Big Ten teams in the top 25. Yep. Like we're still splitting hairs. Like
with 2 more receiving votes.
Yeah, that's how good this conference is. I mean, we were guessing then, and it still doesn't seem to be a big difference between a lot of these teams. It's going to be a really fun conference season. And for MSU, that starts in 2 weeks. They'll host Iowa here, and Iowa's in that top 25 at number 17.
That's a fun opening game. But I'm so excited the Big Ten. We get a little appetizer this coming weekend of some Big Ten games. I think there's some really interesting ones. Obviously, the headliner by rankings is Illinois at Ohio State, but I'm extremely intrigued by Minnesota at Nebraska. I kind of don't know anything about like how good those two teams are. and they're going to play each other. And it's going to be so fascinating to watch this. And obviously, Indiana's at Penn State. You've got some other ones around the conference as well that are absolutely worth watching. It's going to be an awesome weekend. Dalton, congratulations on an awesome weekend for Michigan State. Look forward to watching the Spartans and listening to you as we go through the season.
Thank you so much, Austin. Go Green.
Yeah, we appreciate Dalton for joining us. Michigan State off to a great start, 8-0, as he mentioned, the best start in program history for them. They are our team of the week. Mentioned that Julia Aralt is the player of the week. Some other people we should note that were in that running, in my opinion. Kendall Bostic, 2 more double-doubles for Illinois. They did lose to Kentucky, but she just continues to churn out production for this Illinois squad. She's been so good. Grace Van Sluten, as we just mentioned, certainly worthy of a nod. 19 points a game, had a double-double this week. Asia Petty of Ohio State played great in a couple of games with the Buckeyes, 20.5 points a game, 10 rebounds. First Ohio State double-double of her career, 21st of her career overall. Gracie Merkel put up 31 for Penn State in their overtime win over Drexel. She had a double-double in that as well. Penn State did lose last night to St. John's, their first loss of the season. We're going to talk about Penn State here in a moment. Keomi McMiller of Rutgers, 22 points, had a double-double. She's in the running both for Freshman of the Week and Player of the Week. Lauren Betts, 2 double-doubles, almost 19 points a game. Juju Watkins, 27 points a game, scored 34 in the win over St. Louis. Kiki Iriafem, 30-point double-double in the win over St. Louis. But again, I went with Julia Aralt because of the importance of her performance in the Acrisure tournament and getting her 1,000th career point. Freshman of the week, well, that honor goes to Michigan's Olivia Olson, who had 17 points per game in a pair of games in Fort Myers and had a double-double in a big win over Belmont, a team that gave Ohio State everything it could handle. So she is our freshman of the week, a nod to Keomi McMiller, as we mentioned earlier, and Aaliyah Guyton, who we just talked about with Raina Harmon for her 11 points on 3 of 3 shooting from beyond the arc. But Olivia Olson gets the freshman of the week nod, and they also get our game of the week nod. And because of that, we bring in the voice of Michigan women's basketball, Matt Park. And Matt, a great weekend down in Florida for Michigan women's basketball. They win the Fort Myers tip-off, wins over Belmont and Virginia Tech. Let's start with that Belmont game. That's a team that gave Ohio State everything it could handle, and Michigan comes out with a really nice win. How were they able to do it?
That was a tough game, no doubt about it. Belmont gave us everything we wanted. Defensively, what they do is very unique. And so it took us a little while to kind of figure that out. Tie game through into the late third quarter. We made a nice run third quarter to kind of give ourselves a little bit of space. Got a couple of threes to go down. Finally opened up about a 6 to 9 point lead. And then from there, we're able to kind of handle it and close it out. But that was a gritty win for our team because we did not play our best game, certainly against Belmont. They forced us into some things that we didn't want to do. But in the end, we were able to do what we needed to. And despite the fact that we've been starting 5 guards, we're a really good rebounding team. And that's what really helped against Belmont. Once we started to get some second chance opportunities, that's where we really were able to score and make our run.
That's been one of the things that surprised me about Michigan. It even started in the first game against South Carolina. I believe you out-rebounded the Gamecocks in that opener. And I don't want to spend too much time going all the way back to the opener, but, I mean, that was kind of a, hey, we're here. This is Michigan basketball kind of moment. I know they didn't win, but that performance and now just continuing it out here on this win streak, I've been extremely impressed with how Michigan's come out and played so far this season. What have kind of been your takeaways from the early stages of Michigan?
Well, I think in some ways you do have to go back to that game against South Carolina because I've never felt as good coming out of a loss as I did in that game. You mentioned the rebounds. We rebounded to even with them. We outscored them in second chance points. And to see what Silo Swords did in that game with 27 points and 12 rebounds, that was a hello, I'm here moment for her. And really, that I think gave our team a lot of confidence, even though we lost. To see the way that we played in that game, to see the way that we pushed South Carolina. We didn't back down. Even when they got up 9, we made a run and got it down to 2 with 20 seconds left. We were right there, had a chance. I think that did nothing but build confidence for us. And then we come home and we play those bye games. And even though we weren't challenged in those games, it was great for our development of our kids just to be able to learn how to play with each other. That was really the biggest thing because we have so many new pieces. And so those 5 games kind of gave us a good sense of what we could do. And then I thought really we put it all together in the first half against Virginia Tech. We shot 60%. We held them to 30. We didn't turn the ball over. We out-rebounded them. That's a team that's kind of in our image with Megan Duffy, their head coach, being a former assistant for Kim. They like to do the same kind of things, play tough, play physical, rebound, hard work, all that stuff. So to put it together in the first half against Virginia Tech, I like where this team is going. We got a tough stretch coming up in the next month here in December, but I think what we've established is that this team is going to be a factor in most of the games that it plays in for sure.
I think throughout the season, when I pick my freshman of the week, I'm going to have a couple of options from the Michigan Wolverines. This week, I went with Olivia Olson. I know I picked Silas Swords that opening week with her performance against South Carolina. Just this freshman class in general, they just seem to not be afraid of the moment. And that obviously started on the game 1 with South Carolina, but they just seem ready to go from the start. What's impressed you about the youngsters on Michigan?
I think just that, Austin, that they're not afraid of the moment whatsoever. Liv didn't play her best game against South Carolina, but boy, since then has she been really good. She was the difference in the first half against Virginia Tech. She was attacking them. They had a matchup that they liked against Matilda Act defensively, and they just went to it. A post up, a drive, a pull up in transition. Another drive to a left-hand spin for a layup. I mean, Olsen has so many ways she can score the basketball, and then you add to that what Sila has done and her shooting ability. 6 threes for her in the win over Virginia Tech. She can also rebound the ball well. They're both all-around complete players, and I think that's what's making things work right now. They're not one-dimensional. They are definitely all-around players, both ends of the floor, offense, defense, and they get their nose in there on the boards as well. They have no ego about them either. They're really, really fun to watch, and they're definitely very pleasant young women to be around. I had a chance to sit with Liv at our Thanksgiving dinner and get to know her a little bit better, and just no air about these two. They just want to be great, and they work hard every day to do it.
And amidst the talented start for these freshmen is Jordan Hobbs taking a step forward. She's kind of the focal point of the returnees for Michigan this year, and she's had a really nice start to the season. How have you seen her kind of adapt to a much different role this year with Michigan?
You can tell the leadership really comes from Jordan and Greta Kampschrader. I want to put her in there too. The 4 that stayed dubbed themselves the Quad Squad.
Okay.
And really, I think you have to give them a lot of credit for kind of keeping things together amongst the 4 of them. They were obviously hurt by what happened in the offseason, especially the mass exodus. Layla Filia was one of their best friends. So there was definitely some hurt there, but the way that those 4 have really helped to lead this team, especially Jordan and Greta being seniors, they've stepped up. Jordan Hobbs is an amazing kid. She interned in New York on Wall Street this year. She's in the business school at Michigan at the Ross School of Business, which is an incredibly difficult school to be in. She's doing all that, and she's, as you said, adapting. I mean, the other day, she was playing the 5. She was guarding Rose Mishaw, the former player from Minnesota, down low. She just will do whatever you ask her to do out on the court. I'm incredibly impressed by how she started the year on both ends of the floor, really. And I think that's the thing. I keep talking about defense because I think it gets overlooked, but when we're a 5-guard squad, you're going to have to play some defense on some players that are a lot different than you. And Jordan Hobbs has taken that challenge. She rebounds. She defends with effort. She takes charges. And I think offensively, she's taken a little bit of a step back and kind of let Sila and Olivia sort of be the offensive stars. She can score still, and she will. She's still averaging in double figures. But she's completely content to let them do what they do and just kind of float around, spot up, make threes, drive when she needs to. And obviously, just her leadership and effort you can see on the court every night too.
Before the season, there were a lot of question marks about Michigan. What would this team look like with so many new pieces? You and I talked a little bit about that in the preseason, and here we are heading into week 5 of the season, and Michigan's already in the top 25. They have just one loss to the defending national champions. I know rankings in the first week of December are not that important when it comes to March, but I would imagine there's got to be a little bit of early validation for this team to feel like, okay, we're good. Like there was a lot that went on in the offseason, but we're fine. Kim Barnes-Arico is a fantastic coach. It feels like they've got this thing heading in the right direction.
You're 100% right. And being ranked doesn't mean anything now, except it kind of does when you were so overlooked to start this season. I thought the funniest thing, Austin, was, Charlie Cream. He's the one guy who does bracketology. Michigan wasn't even on his radar. And I know there were a couple of people that asked him about it. And he just said, look, they're too young. They're this, they're that. And what was the one thing that happened after the opening game against South Carolina? He wrote about Michigan and said, okay, I was wrong. They're in the field as an 8 or 9 seed.
Yep.
Obviously, that doesn't mean anything now either. But I think that's what we're.
All right, we lost Matt, it appears, there on the broadcast, but appreciate him joining us in Michigan and what they have been able to do so far this season. He mentioned that Charlie Cream, we had him on the podcast back in the summer, and he said he did not think Michigan would be a tournament team. As it stands right now, they certainly are. They're in the top 25. Let's take a look at what's coming up this week. We've talked a lot about what happened last week. Here's my game to watch for the upcoming week. How about Minnesota off to a 9-0 start, playing without Mara Braun again, at number 25, Nebraska, who's playing without Natalie Potts, who tore her ACL. They're 6-1. They lost to Creighton a couple weeks ago. This is Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock on Big Ten Network. Now, there's maybe better games in terms of rankings, but this one is so intriguing to me. So when I broke down this matchup, first off, Nebraska's had the 30th strength of schedule this year, Minnesota 81st. So the Gophers, a great start to the season for Minnesota. But this is kind of a test for them on the road. Haven't played a whole lot of tough competition yet this season. Minnesota plays slower. They play methodical. They're 332nd in the country in possessions per 40 minutes, but they are very efficient. 23rd in points per 100 possessions, 44th in points per play. They lead the nation in fewest turnovers per game at 9.3, and they're 5th in the country in assist to turnover ratio. They're also very good on defense. They're 9th in opponent field goal percentage, 25th in opponent 2-point percentage, 24th in opponent 3-point percentage. And Minnesota hits the glass extremely well. They are 15 offensive rebounds per game, 43 total rebounds a game. The one thing where Nebraska, I think, could take advantage, Nebraska's a better offensive team overall. Now, that these numbers obviously aren't fully in with the whole Natalie Potts out for the season, but 86.5 points a game, that's 11 more than Minnesota. They're 4th nationally in field goal percentage, 3rd nationally in 3-point percentage, 18th in 2-point percentage. They lead the country in points per play at about 1 point every play for Nebraska. Minnesota gives up a big opponent 3-point rate. About 33% of opponent field goals are 3-pointers. And as we just mentioned, Nebraska is 3rd in 3-point percentage in the country. So can Nebraska get some 3-point looks? I think they can against Minnesota. And if they start to make them inside Pinnacle Bank Arena, that place is going to get loud. It's going to be tough for Minnesota to win in there. That's where I kind of look at what Nebraska could do to pull away. But it'll be interesting. They're 11th in total rebound rate, and they're 19th in defensive rebound rate, which is important because Minnesota hits the offensive glass well. I think some of Minnesota's strengths match up well with some of Nebraska's strengths. An extremely intriguing game to me Sunday afternoon inside Simon Scott, or geez, I'm talking like I'm in Bloomington, in Pinnacle Bank Arena. Very excited to see that one. 2 o'clock Big Ten Network Sunday afternoon. Must watch, in my opinion. Some of the other good games, and we'll start on a Saturday. Indiana at Penn State. Penn State, I should have updated this graphic. Last night they fell to St. John's. So Penn State does have its first loss of the season. Indiana's 5-3. They have won 4 of their last 5 and seem to be playing some better basketball here. What do the numbers say about this matchup? Well, Indiana relies heavily on getting to the free throw line. They're 14th in the country in free throw percentage, and they're 26th nationally in the percentage of their points coming from free throws, 23%. Penn State is 29th in the country in foul rate. So they do not foul a ton. Indiana relies a lot on getting and making free throws. So that'll be an interesting matchup there. Most of the other numbers do skew in Penn State's direction, but another thing to consider, Indiana has played the 13th strength of schedule, Penn State 66. So Indiana has had a tougher go of it on the schedule side so far. Most numbers, as we mentioned, offensively to Penn State. They're 9th in the country in points per game, 14th in possessions per 40 minutes, 9th in field goal percentage, 27th in three-point percentage. Penn State hits the glass well, about 15 offensive rebounds a game. They're 16th in the country in total rebounds a game. The area where they could slip up is they do turn the ball over a lot, over 21 turnovers a game for Penn State. That's last in the Big Ten. Gracie Merkel is a low down low, 21 points a game, second in the Big Ten in scoring, but only averaging 21 minutes a game. So she's very efficient when she's on the floor. She's second in the conference in field goal percentage at 64% and 6th in rebounds per game at 9.5. Mariah Murray leads the Big Ten in three-point attempts at 10 a game and three-point makes at 4.5 a game. She and Yarden Garzone are 2 of the 4 Big Ten players qualified for the three-point percentage leaderboard. Mariah Murray in second at 44%, Garzone third at 39%. Both teams are very good at limiting free throw attempts. Both teams give up a lot of three-point looks. If Indiana gives up looks to Mariah Murray, that could come back to haunt them. Hoosiers shot great from 3 in their most recent game against Maine. A lot of interesting things here because if Indiana, a team that was picked to finish 5th in the Big Ten Conference, if they want to start to move back up into that type of stratosphere in the Big Ten, these are the games you got to go on the road and win. No Sidney Parrish for the Hoosiers, but we'll see if they can bring the way they've been playing lately on the road with them to Happy Valley. How about this one up in Eugene Saturday afternoon? Number 6 USC at Oregon. Oregon has lost 2 straight games, but they are certainly a team that is capable of winning this game. They beat Baylor at home earlier this season. So I kind of cooked up some things in my notes. How does Oregon win this game? Well, USC's struggles are primarily from beyond the arc. They shoot less than 30% from 3. When they lost to Notre Dame, USC shot 1 of 13 from 3. Oregon does not shoot it particularly well either, though, at 31%. So it does feel like a recipe for a win here is Oregon shoots a little bit above its percentage. They make some big-time threes, and USC continues to struggle. Turnovers have been an issue at times for USC, almost 17 a game, 21 turnovers in the loss to Notre Dame. Oregon is not super elite in this, but they are way better than last season. They were really poor last year in turning over opponents. This year, they're up 7 turnovers per game at about 17 forced per contest. That's another thing. Can they get easy buckets off of USC turnovers? Oregon will try and slow the game down. They got to win the glass. USC is 13th nationally in offensive rebounds, 23rd in total rebounds. So that's the 3 things for Oregon. Got to make more threes than USC. Got to limit the turnovers on your end, force some that lead to easy buckets on the other end, and try and slow the game down and win that offensive glass. I think there is a recipe for an Oregon win in this one. We touched on the non-conference one earlier with Raina Harmon, Tennessee, and number 17, Iowa, a couple undefeated teams in the Champions Classic. That is Saturday night, 7 o'clock on Fox. Back to the Big Ten, number 21, Illinois at number 12, Ohio State. This is the marquee matchup in terms of the rankings, Sunday at 4 o'clock on BTN. Defense is the calling card for Illinois. They're getting really good production from their defense. They lead the country in opponent three-point percentage, which is going to be important because Chance Gray is on the other side of this thing for Ohio State. She leads all Big Ten qualified shooters in three-point percentage at 46%. Ohio State and Illinois going strength versus strength. Illinois is second nationally, fewest turnovers a game at 9.4. Ohio State is second nationally in forced turnovers at 27.5. So you got one team takes care of the basketball very well, another team that forces a ton of turnovers. That's an intriguing battle there. Also, strength versus strength. Ohio State 16th nationally in offensive rebounds per game. Illinois 18th nationally in defensive rebounds per game. So Illinois does a great job of cleaning up the defensive glass. Ohio State does a great job crashing the offensive glass. Extremely excited to see how that matchup goes. Illinois, 97th strength of schedule so far this season. This will be their toughest task of the season. They did just play Kentucky, a very good team, who got them pretty good, 76-53. So that's the big one in Columbus Sunday. And one more Sunday, 5 o'clock, Big Ten Plus. Washington hosting UCLA. Is there an avenue for the number one team to go down in Seattle? Washington is going to slow down the game. That's what they do. They're going to try and limit possessions. They held LSU to 32% shooting and just 3 of 19 from 3 when they almost pulled the upset over the top 10 Tigers. UCLA gives up a 37% opponent three-point rate. Washington shoots the ball at about 35% from long range. Washington's going to have to take advantage of the open looks they get that UCLA may provide them, but they're going to have to win the glass. And maybe not even win the glass, but just stay within striking distance. UCLA 5th in the country in offensive rebound rate. Washington cannot get in foul trouble. This is one of their strengths. They do not foul a ton, less than 14 fouls a game. Can they keep UCLA off the free throw line? And if they do, for UCLA, can you make them? UCLA shoots just 68% from the free throw line. This one seems less likely to me than the Oregon-USC upset, but there is still some ingredients to a Washington win. It's intriguing that the first weekend of the season, both number 1 UCLA and number 6 USC are on the road. Going to be very fascinating to see how they handle these early Big Ten challenges. Awesome slate of Big Ten games this week. We just mentioned the headliners right there, but there are obviously more throughout the weekend. Tonight in women's basketball, Mount St. Mary's at Maryland at 7 o'clock. Lindenwood at Nebraska at 8 o'clock. North Florida at Minnesota, also at 8 o'clock. Cal Baptist at USC at 9:30. The other Big Ten games we did not mention, Maryland is at Purdue Saturday afternoon. And then Sunday, you got Northwestern at Michigan and Rutgers at Wisconsin. So awesome to have some Big Ten basketball back in our lives Saturday and Sunday. A little taste of the conference season before we dip back into non-conference play. Thanks so much to all our guests, Matt Park, Dalton Shetler, Raina Harmon, for coming on the show here today. It's been our longest show of the year, jam-packed with plenty to talk about and plenty more to talk about next week when we will be recapping our first Big Ten games of this season. Thanks so much for joining us. A reminder, we're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts, so give us a like, a download, a follow over there. Show our episodes live every Tuesday at noon on the YouTube channel. Then they're posted on the podcast feed. Episode 27 in the books. Talk to you guys next Tuesday here on the Dribble Drive podcast.